everybody. On behalf of the city of Harrisburg and Mayor Copperfuss, who's on his way, I believe, I'm going to open up. I'm Jackie Parker. I'm the Executive Director for Community and Economic Development for the city of Harrisburg. And under that does fall Parks and Recreation. And I wanted to introduce, most of you know Kevin, who's the head of Parks and Rec. And we're very happy to see you tonight here because this is our last public meeting for the design for Reservoir Park. It's been a long but very fun process, and we've had a lot of input. I'm very happy to see that we've had input from neighbors, we've had input from the public, people who use the park a lot. We get phone calls, and of course you'll hear more about about the results of those efforts in reaching out. We also have great consultants. They're wonderful consultants. E.H. Black, there's Ed right there, Ed Black, and Simone Collins. And Peter Simone's going to be part of it, and Christine Hunter's part of all that too. But they've been working very, very hard at coming up with and collating all the things that they heard from the public on what we would like to see for that park, which is a gem for the city and strategically located, and I know I enjoy it. So without any further ado, I do want to thank Mr. Randolph for the use of the Kappa Omega building, because this is our third time here.
Yes, sir.
So thank you so much.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is James Randolph. I'm the 2020 Club Catering Manager, and I'm a member of the House Board. And basically, we open our doors because this is something that's near and dear to a lot of individuals that are within this community. That park, again, I said, put a little bit of personality into your ideas and your thoughts, but make sure that you use the park. Don't be afraid to get a permit. Don't be afraid to talk to someone about an event you may have. Thank you.
I'm very pleased to be here. My name is Ed Black. My firm was one of the firms, H. Edward Black and Associates was one of the firms that worked on the actual design of the Reservoir Park Master Plan. And my cohort was Peter Simone and Simone Collins was the other half of the team. Tonight we're going to have some agenda items, and I'll read these to you so that you know where you might want to plan your involvement. I'm going to go through some introductions of the design team so you know who worked on the project. We're going to go through a project review. We will make a master plan presentation. This is the final public meeting on the master plan. And then we're going to have a presentation on phasing, cost, and funding. And then we will open the meeting to general discussion, questions, and comments that you may have. The team consists of myself. I'm a landscape architect, and my project manager for this project was Christine Hunter. She is a landscape architect also. You're going to hear about a lot of landscape architects because this is what we do. Peter Simone is a principal with Simone Collins. He's a landscape architect, and Sarah Leeper, who is not able to be with us tonight, but Sarah was a very important part of this whole design process. To let you know what has gone before, this is the fourth of 4 public meetings. And you can see that, and I'll go down this list. We've had 6 committee meetings where we got good information. We had 4 focus groups. We had a web survey, and we had a kids survey where the young people were actually asked what they'd like to see in Reservoir Park, and some of their comments were a lot different than the adults. Also, then we conducted key 12-person or agency interviews, and for those we went, and I conducted most of those. We went to organizations that might be able to help us to make this project go. So they were very interesting, and it was rewarding to me to hear the people that are the engine for the city of Harrisburg and in the industry part of Harrisburg. They were all in favor of seeing Reservoir Park renovated. Our city steering committee consisted of these folks: Brenda Barrett, Lorraine Callion, Deandra Chapman. I may kill some of these names. I apologize if I do. Carl Dixon from Dauphin County Parks, Keila Evans, Destiny Hodges, Evelyn Hunt, Jeff Knight, Claude Phipps, Scott Shepler, and Pastor Ricardo Volci. They were all very important to us in the design process. And with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Peter, who is going to do the bulk of the project presentation this evening.
Thanks, Ed. The other agency that's very important, of course, is this is a project that's funded jointly by the city and the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. Lori Ike is here tonight. Lori, raise your hand, please. Lori is a very important person in this process because the state agency, they provide funding to communities all over the Commonwealth. And certainly this project couldn't happen without DCNR's involvement. It's a great program that DCNR runs. It's as apolitical as a program can be. It's based on merit, and they're all about getting money, your tax money, back to this community. It's actually real estate transfer tax money. Again, DCNR is a great agency to work with, and we're hoping they'll continue to be partners. We've done about an 11-month process here, or 10-month process. This is our last public meeting. You can see how the work has gone. And we worked with the committee to establish goals, and you can see them here. I won't read all of them, but you know, one of the things is the park has had less use in recent years than it used to have, so we want to increase use of the park. That's certainly a good thing, make it more successful. We want to get more people to the park from a greater part of the city. I mean, this is a great neighborhood park, but it's also a regional resource. And you know, the first time I went up to the park and looked out, it was like, wow, this is $1 million view. And it's a really important facility, and one that's not really replicated in communities all across the country. This is a very special place. We want to build new constituencies. In the past, there have been some strong groups that use the park. We want to find new groups that will take ownership of the park to be stewards. We work, and Ed works in communities all over the state. No government can do it by themselves anymore, so we need park stewards, and that's where you come in. We want you to take ownership of the park, help the city with maintenance, and it can be as simple as, you know, picking up a potato chip bag and putting it in a trash receptacle. All that is very important in terms of creating constituencies, and we want to give you and other people reasons to come back to the park over and over in terms of events and activities and facilities. We want you to be proud of this park. I'm sure you already are. The bones of it are very solid, but we want to make those bones better. We want to have both short-term and long-term successes. This is a plan, and you'll see it's a costly plan. It's going to take a decade or more to fully implement. It's not going to happen overnight. But what we hope the city can do with your help is make every year or so, make steps to move it forward. One of the things that happened this summer, if you've been there, the Symphony, Harrisburg Symphony, I understand had a great event, and my understanding is they want to do that every year. I mean, that's the type of great things that can happen in this park. And it's, to us, and I'm sure to you, it's very exciting to see that happen. Maintenance is a big cost, and you'll see we've made some recommendations to reduce the maintenance in the park. We have to be very strategic where we put our maintenance dollars, because as I said, no city government or township government can do it all alone anymore. And we really want to make this functional, beautiful, and environmentally appropriate. So those are our goals. And you know, the bones of this park started back in the City Beautiful movement. Jeb Stewart's here tonight with the Parks Foundation. And they did a report a few years ago about the City Beautiful movement. This was a movement back at the turn of the century where communities all across the country wanted to establish great civic places and parks, and this was one of them. And these are just some historic aerials, and you can see the bones is pretty much the same as they were almost 100 years ago. And you know, there was more housing in the surrounding areas. By the time we get to the 50s, after the World War II, we had a big surface basin here. Flat Top was already an underground basin. The expansion of the bandshell, we had bandshell seating that was put in. This is a shot from 1970. And then sometime between 70 and the present day, that on-ground reservoir became the two big tanks that we know today. The Civil War Museum was added. But essentially the park is its main roads and spaces and the great topography. Obviously you can't do much about the topography in the hills. That's the same. So it's the same park that your forebears enjoyed maybe over 100 years ago. And you know, there are some good facilities, some facilities that need some repair. And so one of our charges was how do we get the best use out of the land and the buildings that are there? And we looked at a number of things. Just to go through this quickly, I know you know the park. The flat top area, we talked to somebody in our focus group who used to go to his high school football practice up there. And he has fond memories of getting all bruised up there. So it's a lawn area, there's big tanks under here. Capital Region Water now has control of these. They're planning some renovations and some security enhancements on the vents that are there. So they're going to be a big partner here as the city moves forward. The museum, it's city-owned, has a big parking area. It's got a dramatic overlook, and they do have a rental space. So this is, the museum has even greater potential to fulfill in terms of how it can work with the community. We've got a central area of the park. We've got some fountains that aren't functioning. We've got the Detweiler Memorial. It's a lot of high maintenance here. One of our charges is how can we reduce maintenance? Also, there is a private movement afoot that private groups are looking at restoring these fountains and establishing a maintenance endowment. So not only will they be fixed, but there'll be money for their continued maintenance. And that's a very exciting development that's moving forward, sort of independent of what the city does, but in cooperation with the city. We've got the Arts Village. We've got a restroom building there that's not being used. We'd like to see that repaired and put back into use. We've got the old brownstone. That's the historic building that we think could be a great little coffee house or an ice cream shop. Even if it's only on weekends, it's a great space if you haven't been in there. So there's more potential here. The old greenhouse area is pretty much shot, but the historic head house is there. And is there a way we could reuse this space and put it to use, and put it to productive use? The tanks that are there that replace that reservoir that you saw in the previous historic aerials, the tanks have been there for a while. And the really interesting thing is, some years ago, a community group did the murals there. Those murals haven't been tagged, they haven't been graffitied. They're really sort of cool if you haven't looked at them closely. And they've held up. And the reason they've held up is because members of the community, maybe some of you, participated in doing those. And that's a real nice thing. And it takes what's sort of an industrial structure and adds a little color and beauty to it. The courts are well used. You know, one was renovated. There's limited parking in the area. The tennis courts are now underused. Tennis has fallen off a little bit in terms of use. It's still used, but not as much as it was maybe 20 years ago. The State Street, not State Street, Walnut Street entrance is dramatic. These are columns, historic columns that were placed there. But it's confusing. If you're a first-time visitor, it's a little confusing coming in there. So can we improve this entry so it's clearer and maybe a little safer, having to go around that circle? Again, even if you've been through there, it's not really quite clear who has the right-of-way, so we've made some suggestions there. The playground is well used. It's a little bit worn out, to put it politely. It's a big area. How can we improve the playground? And it's how can we make it better? It needs a major facelift, obviously. The pavilion building has had some repairs thanks to Kevin and his crew. That's used for rentals. It's part of the historic fabric, and it still remains an important building. The mansion, or the Eugenia Smith Family Life Center, which was renamed several years ago, is used as a park office. I don't know if the archives have moved out of there yet. The archives used to be kept up on the third floor. Kevin, has that happened yet? No, but they're going to be moved out. So we looked at how could this building be better used to create some traffic, to create some reasons for people to go back and forth to that building. And you know, one of the principles of having a park that's secure is having a lot of people there, having eyes on the park all the time. And that's one of the goals of getting more people there, because there have been some folks during the meetings who have expressed some concerns about security. And mainly it's, I would characterize it as nuisance crime. But still we want to increase use. And what's the best potential use for this building? The band shell, I just mentioned the symphony being there, Shakespeare in the Park. I guess is that happening now or coming up soon?
Yes.
It happens, okay. And so that's, and we want to get more events there. One of our focus groups included the two gentlemen from the Harrisburg Music Festival, and they're very interested in having more events and speaking to longtime residents. There used to be a lot more events, and certainly that can happen again, and this is a great facility. And it's a unique facility. There are several around, but not that many. So as Ed mentioned, we've gone through a pretty extensive public process. I'm sure some of you have, or maybe here, I see some new faces here for the first time, and it's great. We're glad you're here. This is sort of the end of the master planning, but sort of the start of the much harder work in terms of talking to agencies like DCNR and Lori, encouraging them to support the park, looking for business sponsors, looking at other agencies for funding, and enlisting you as stewards of the park. So there's still going to be a lot of work moving forward to implement the changes. At one of our first meetings, we did brainstorming, and we just asked everybody, what would you like? And we did this also in the survey, if you took the survey. And we generated, or you generated, a lot of great ideas. And if you look at the master plan report, and it is online, and there'll be an address at the end. This is our draft report. If you look in here, you'll see that a lot of the ideas that were generated made it into the plan. So that's the whole purpose of having these meetings, that we hear what you want and try to incorporate those when possible. We also had focus groups. We had educational focus group. We had the fine arts focus group. We had government agencies, and we had advocacy organizations. So we got more feedback from them in 4 separate meetings. And then the survey, we had about 140 responses on the survey. Those results are in the master plan report, so you can read those. I'm not going to take your time to go through those. The thing that we did recently was a kids survey. We called it the Future Leader Opinion Poll. And you can see the results here, as you might expect. We asked them, do you like this, do you don't like it, or do you not have an answer? We had about 59 responses that I guess Kevin or Jackie spearheaded getting these kids to sit down and fill out a survey and think about this.
Kevin and Sasha.
Kevin and Sasha, thank you. And so you can see, a new playground was popular, a water play area where you can go in on a day like this and get wet, whether you're a kid or an adult. I think that would be popular. More bathrooms. I mean, it's a big park. You need more bathrooms. It's just a basic need. Closing some roads to some of the parks. One of the big concerns we heard is safety. We got some people going through there, and we all become different when we're a motorist as opposed to when we're a pedestrian. I think we're nicer. We are all nicer when we're pedestrians, maybe. We become motorists, we get a little crazy. But people cut through the park at high speeds. So we looked at how can we make that safer. It's a safety issue. And you'll see we've recommended maybe closing parts of some roads. We understand that's going to inconvenience some people, and we'll talk about that, how we can do it on a trial basis to see if it works. And there are a lot of options there. Water fountains where you can get a drink, basic need. Hill for sledding. One of the groups that came to us was a handball group, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the name. It's like Handball Now or something.
Hope for handball.
What is it?
Hope and handball.
Hope and Handball, and they're very organized, and they would like to have an outdoor handball court. You can hit a ball and play handball. They've got a big group, and so we've looked at that. Food trucks, the potential, and again, these are the results the kids had, fixing up basketball courts, new pavilions, and then we got into things that adults might like, new seating in the band shell, well, 50-50 on the kids. A trike and a skateboard path near the water parks, that was 50-50. You'll see a bicycle pump track. And then the one thing that was a little bit of a surprise, we have asked them about a dog park with a fence so you could bring your dog and they can run around. For whatever reason, the kids who took this either don't have dogs, don't like dogs, or don't want a dog park. So there was 19 to 80 here. So those are the results we got from the kids, and we want to involve them. It was a suggestion from a lot of people had. So, and these are the these are the folks that Ed sat down and spent probably an hour with each of these individuals, including the mayor and the fire chief and the chief of police and other people here, the director of Harrisburg Area Community College Foundation Board, the CEO of the Civil War Museum. So those results of those discussions are in the report. We've got their opinions and their suggestions, and we've tried to incorporate those into the plan. We also had one of the consultants that was on the team was a firm called Urban Partners from Philadelphia, and they're economic consultants. And they looked at a number of things in terms of what other things could we have in the park that might generate maybe a little bit of income, but mainly more use of the park and more reasons for people to come here. And they looked at things like a restaurant or a seasonal restaurant or a bed and breakfast or a small retreat center, whereas if you have a small business, you can bring 15 people for a day, get away from the phones, and do strategic planning for your business. So they looked at a whole host of things, and the things that came to the top, sort of rose to the top, was a B&B appears to have potential based upon their talking to other B&B enthusiasts. And if you think about if the mansion was renovated and by a private sector company who would take a lease with the city, what a great place to go for a weekend. You can enjoy the attractions of the city, of the area. It's a good place to go to Hershey. So they thought that had some potential. Also in that same building, another option might be a retreat center, a business center, to host business retreats. And again, it's a way to get different people to the park and get them to know about the park. And sometimes when those different groups come in, you find you create supporters because they're aware of what a great facility this is. So those are two sort of things that they thought are worth exploring. And the way you do that, you can send out an RFP or an RFQ, a request for information from entrepreneurs to see if people are interested in doing that. They did look at a restaurant. They're not recommending a restaurant. They didn't think that the market would support it at this time. It may support something like food trucks. Food trucks can be great additions. If you've ever been to Austin, Texas, there are vacant lots all over the city where food trucks go, and they set up lights and picnic tables, and it's to use an old term, it's a happening. I mean, people are everywhere. The food trucks are great, and it's very much like a party. And so food trucks, and we've shown an area on the plan for food trucks. So our consultant thought food trucks may be able to work at the park on a more regular basis. Perhaps occasional flea markets or a farmer's market also are things that could work in Reservoir Park. There are also a series of events. You may have heard of them. They call them pop-up events, where there's a great one in the city of Camden, right at City Hall, where they brought in a piano, and it's covered, and they bring it outside, and these people come out of the woodwork, and they play all kinds of piano, jazz, classical, modern, and it creates a whole different feel, and it's like a little pop-up park. And there are things that can happen with programming too. That could be a weekend, it could be a week in Reservoir Park. So those are interesting. So as we start to explore these options, we wanted to focus in, and we want to focus on enriching the current strengths. Certainly there are some really great attributes to the park. We want to be compatible with park uses in the existing neighborhood. We don't want to create things in the park that are going to be bad for the neighborhood. We want to be respectful of the people who live close. We have a lot of constraints in the park, especially all the steep slopes. So that's just a given, and we have to work with that. We want to bring, as I said, new user groups and partners into the park to help with the activities and mix of people there. And then we want to maximize use of existing buildings. So those are some of the concepts. And as we worked with the committee and the city staff, and also through the first 3 public meetings, we developed optional plans. We developed 3 different options. I'm not going to go through these. They're in the master plan report. And each of these plans had pluses and minuses. And based on, and we also looked at circulation. We looked at, actually we had a 5th, I think we might have even had a 5th circulation plan, where we looked at how can we make the park safer for pedestrians and bicyclists. And the goals here were to calm the traffic, discourage speeding and cut through traffic. That's very important, we thought. We want to separate, we want to provide places for pedestrians and bikes to be and places for vehicles to be. We thought that was very important. And we want to introduce a little more clarity in terms of how do you get to the park and how do you go through it. Some of that, the city has done some new signage this last year. That has helped things. And if they institute a circulation change, then that will further clarify things. The signage may have to be changed a little bit. So we're really looking to make the park safer. And as I mentioned, anytime you close a road or a part of the road, we certainly know there'll be some neighbors or some people who cut through the park who will be discouraged and they won't like it. But again, when we get to that plan, you'll see how this can be done on a temporary trial basis for not a lot of money, just using gates. At our second meeting, we put these up on the wall. People there gave us like a snapshot of the things they like the best, the things they like the least. So we got some feedback there. So when we got to this, what was the draft master plan, now this master plan, this report has been up on the website for about 60 days or more. It'll remain up there. And after tonight's meeting, we're gonna, the reason we ask you to sign in is DCNR wants us to have a thorough public involvement process. So your names, without your addresses and phone numbers and email, we'll blank those out. We'll go into the final report. You'll see the earlier people who attended. And we'll, in the next month or so, we'll make the final changes to this report. And as a perfect segue, Mayor Papoukas is here. We're just about to get into the master plan, so if you want to make some comments or...
Yeah, no, just that I am very, very excited with all of the options that are being proposed, and I think the key to a good plan is civic engagement and participation, and it's nice to see a terrific crowd. This is really a great turnout. So yeah, I'll stick around now for the rest of the meeting, and we'll hopefully have a vigorous back and forth. So glad everyone's here. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Mayor. So again, when we got to the final plan, a couple recurring themes came up over and over. And this is both from the committee and people who attended the meetings. One, we need to be clean, green, and safe. Those are the basic things if we're going to have an improved park. So we got to focus on that. We also heard we want to keep things free, meaning we don't want to create lots of things in the park where you have to pay to get in. I think, you know, we've got a museum that's an admission price. Certainly that attracts certain people, and they, I guess, have 2 free days a year. But we don't want to create more facilities like that. We want to make sure this is a public park. We want to provide more non-traditional play activities. And also, one of the things that came up is, you know, we had the one playground area. Well, maybe, you know, we talked about dispersing them to have smaller playgrounds, maybe age separated in different parts of the park, which you'll see. We want to increase the number and frequency of festivals and events. That's an easy thing to say. It's an expensive thing to do. And again, one of the reasons we hope you will become stewards is through your contacts, businesses, associations. Every city has to look for funding to fund those things, whether it's as simple as movie night in the park. You know, if you had a series of, you know, even a couple of movies a month, that would be something sort of neat to bring people to the park. You get to meet your neighbors. You might meet somebody from another part of the city you don't know who comes to that. So that takes some cost. It makes some cost, but we have to have the facility to do it. That's important. And also, just to promote Reservoir Park. I think one of the things that happened with this meeting, Jackie was saying that the notice for the meeting went out with sewer bill or one of those trash bill. So that's great, and probably some of you saw that and the reason why you're here. So continue marketing is important. So this is the master plan, the final master plan. We've gotten some comments in the last 60 days. They haven't been extensive. We certainly can accept some more comments, and those changes could be done when the project moves into construction documents, hopefully in the next year or so. So I'm going to go through each section of the park just to orient everybody. This of course is State Street up here. Here's Market Street, okay, and then Whitehall Street over here. So I'm just going to take you through the different sections of the park and try to note the various improvements that we planned. Now, this is at the corner of Whitehall and Reservoir Road and Walnut, thank you. So some of the things we've suggested, you'll see more details as we go through, is a traffic circle at the entry to clarify traffic, and also to make Walnut a one-way this way to create parking. One of the things we need in the park for events is more parking, but we don't want to create lots more paved area. So if we're able to make Walnut Street one way down to this point, and we're able to create on-street parking without creating more paving. So that's another suggestion. Up at the courts, we show 4 handball courts right here, which would be on the existing tennis courts. We also show a pavilion. One of the things that's happened in this area, sometimes there's a small concert or an event, or maybe a little festival, or this could even be rented out for family reunions. And then where the tennis court, the third tennis court is now, to also reline that for a sport called pickleball, which you'll see a picture of in a minute. It's a sport that's growing in popularity. It's really for young kids and aging baby boomers because you don't have to run as far as you do in tennis, and it's getting actually a lot of popularity. We want to suggest some grandstands here overlooking the basketball courts, so when there's tournaments, there's somewhere dry and nice to sit. We renovate the other courts that haven't been renovated. And then one of the suggestions is to expand the parking here. Right now the parking lot's very small. To expand it, I think we're about doubling the capacity of it, and then redo the drive so you come up, drive, and come back out. And it also relates to the circulation plan, which we'll get to in a few minutes. We also are suggesting, and we'll see a picture of this, what we're calling a trike skateboard park around those big tanks. This is an area that's sort of not used very much, really, and we thought while respecting the distance from the tanks, we could have an area where kids could either go skateboard or rollerblade or on a scooter or on a little bike maybe and ride around. It's actually it's sort of a nice area. So again, just some illustrations. The handball courts, really all they require are these concrete walls. They could also be places for murals and things like are on the water tank presently. And we were able to get 4 of these handball courts on one of the tennis courts. This is a pickleball, and you can see you've got our aging baby boomers and some younger kids. And again, it's sort of like ping pong, but on a bigger setting. And again, it's getting very, very popular in a lot of places. The tiered seating, and these are just some examples, above the basketball courts, they could be done a number of ways, and these are examples of tiered seating in other places. And then this trike skateboard track, this is a simple trail. It could have some topography to it. It could be a prefab structure, but it can serve a lot of different users and age groups. And it's a new activity in that part of the park, which doesn't have a lot of activity. At the Walnut Street intersection, what we're suggesting again is Walnut Street south from State to Whitehall, and creating a traffic circle that clarifies circulation at that point. You'll see it's a low priority. This is something to be done farther into the future. But since we were looking at this park, we thought we should take the opportunity to clarify the circulation into the park. And you've probably seen, here's an example of a traffic circle. They're happening more and more in Pennsylvania, and they actually enhance safety for motorists and pedestrians.
Okay, go back to that last screen. First one, Walnut Street, one way south
Yes,
from
ma'am.
State to
Whitehall. So it'd be
doesn't
one
make
way
sense.
south.
I'm not,
We'd make it one way. The first section right at the top here behind the club is one way now.
yeah.
But if we made it one way all the way, what that does is allows us to pick up a number of parking spaces in the paved area. And so people you'd have to circulate around if you lived on that block, if you faced the park.
Okay, I'm just confused with where State Street intersects.
I guess we're saying state from the top all the way down.
Okay.
Yeah, the whole length of it. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. If you're going to make that one-way on Walnut coming from up by where that restaurant is down, where that circle is.
Yes, ma'am.
Are they planning on, and I think it would be a good idea, making Whitehall Street a one-way all the way up instead of the last block? I live on Whitehall Street for 55 plus years and it's a mess.
Yeah, Whitehall is, we're not suggesting changing that, but again, this is at a concept level, and if this goes forward, what the city would need to do is employ a traffic engineer and look at this in detail.
I wish they would, because I think the genius that made Whitehall Street the last block one way and left the rest of them two-way, like where I live, is, they're a genius who thought of that one.
Okay. Well, it wasn't
it's
us.
awful.
But that can be looked at too, so thank you for that comment. I'm just going to move on to, we can come back to any of this also if you have a question that you want to go over. And we get to the mansion area, one of the constraints I mentioned, here's Walnut Street again, here's the entry into the park, is parking. And we also have a very big play area. So what we're suggesting is expanding parking to a total of 88 spaces, which about doubles the capacity now. And then we have a spray on this. The way the circulation would work is you'd come in, you could circulate into the parking and go back out, or you'd come in and continue up and circulate out above the bandshell and back out. So above that, so this road, once this is done, this existing driveway is really not necessary, and we could create what we're calling a spray park in there, number 11. And then there's a hilled area where there's old gardens that are sort of overgrown today. And here we're suggesting, if you remember the game, there was old design of Chutes and Ladders playground, a playground that would have a number of slides and climbing structures and some topography that kids could climb on. And there's a great example in Boston called Maggie Daley Park. It's a new park, you can Google it, it's really pretty exciting. Something with some topography that would be very exciting for kids. We also have a tot lot that would be for younger age kids here. Also at the bandshell, one of the big things we heard from members of the community years ago, the hillside seating, the terraces were taken away. So we want to bring back some terraces so it's easier to sit there to watch a concert. Also, we talked about food trucks earlier, and we suggested some pull-offs on Concert Drive here for food trucks. So the food trucks could pull off, park into the hillside a little bit, and not be in the way of cars going by. And probably during a concert, you know, this drive would probably be closed to vehicles anyway, because you don't want, you know, cars going through there. Also, you'll see some recommendations for an expanded trail for the Greenbelt Trail that goes through here later. In terms of the buildings, we're proposing a new restroom here that would be built. Also, over at what is the guard shack now at the park entry, we would, I don't know if that renovation's been completed or partially completed, Kevin? Partially completed, but that would become really a restroom building that could service both the bandshell and the park. This is the pavilion building, and then this is the mansion that could become perhaps a bed and breakfast, or perhaps a business retreat center that businesses come in and use and rent, and then the existing pavilion. So in terms of some examples, the playground, and these are just some basic examples of playgrounds that have slopes and topography changes to them. And there are any number of, you know, options here. You're only limited by your imagination, so when you get to this point, you'd want to employ a talented playground designer and come up with something that would be very exciting for kids, and this would probably be from age 4 to like 10 or so, or 12, that age range. This is not really going to be for real young kids, would have different areas for toddlers. And then that water play area you know, you see these everywhere. If you've been to Philly lately, they did a big one of these in front of City Hall. And it has changed the complexion of City Hall. City Hall used to be a place where you really didn't hang out. Today, everybody hangs out there because it's a spray pool and a little coffee place and they have events. Well, this could happen sort of below the pavilion, and these are just jets that come out from the pavement. They're all computer programmed. The water goes back into the ground. It's filtered. There's a filtration system just like in a pool. And on a day like today, this thing would be packed with kids and adults. So again, facilities like this are becoming more and more popular. Tiered seating in front of the band shell. And again, these are just some examples. This is one in Norristown. This is the Reading City Park band shell that was renovated a few years ago. This is an example from somewhere else, I'm not sure. But again, just having these tiers, and your situation is a little steeper, it'd be something like this, but just having those tiers so you can either sit on a wall or a grass or bring a chair and be comfortable. I mentioned the fountain area, and again, we have the main fountain here. We have another playground here. We're calling it the Mother Tree Music Play, where the thought is to introduce a small playground where kids and adults could go and use implements to make music in the landscape. You'll see an example of that. Also, another top lot playground a little further up the hill, and then where the second fountain is, to make that a zero-depth fountain like the ones you saw earlier, but by maintaining the sculpture. And I can show examples of that. So what Jeb Stewart was telling me tonight is his group is working towards testing all the piping and the plumbing and the electrical for the main fountain. And he said you may see water going through there in the next week or so, testing it out, and hopefully, if all goes well, very soon that fountain may be functioning again. For the second fountain, if you recall it over on the other side of the hill, this is the existing condition. There's a small pool here. So the thought is keep the sculpture as a nice element as it is, but get rid of this pool and then do something like this where you have a few more jets, maybe a little more modest, so you have a second zero-depth fountain that's smaller, but keeps the sculpture, but creates a smaller spray pool area that also could be enjoyed on a day like today. It also becomes sort of a civic feature, and you're not having to deal with holding water and this leaking and that type of thing. And you can see different examples of that from different places. So we think those are both viable, and again, through the Park Foundation's work, hopefully you'll have a new fountain or operating fountain soon. This is an example of music play where simple but very durable installations can create, things like drums or this heavy metal xylophone or a smaller one that kids and adults can go up and make a little noise. And it may be a theme for this playground. It might not be the only thing here. And again, this is a concept. So when you went to design this, you'd want to look at other things. And then another thing that's happening lately is called nature-based play, and to incorporate natural elements like rocks and logs, and sometimes these are actually logs made of, believe it or not, plastic, but creating things that look like natural elements, and also including plants, and getting, not divorcing kids from plants and trees, but bringing those into the playground so that kids play in a more natural setting. And it's something that is very popular now. DCNRs, I think, remains to be interested in this type of playground environment. And then, of course, creating more pavilions in the park, trying to not just do any pavilion, but one that complements the architecture of the mansion and the existing playground. And these, of course, can be very popular for small family reunions and little events that the community may want to have. In the museum area, we have Flat Top, which of course is there, museum building. And here, I guess there's 3 or 4 things I want to call your attention to. One is, and we'll show an example, maybe to create a little outdoor cafe in conjunction with the Civil War Museum that might be seasonal, where there might be some tables out there and chairs, and you could go and maybe buy a cold drink, or maybe on weekends a hot dog, real simple stuff, or maybe sandwiches, low price, that would create a nice place to go up and sit, enjoy the view, and have a snack during the day or maybe on a nice evening, depending on when it could operate. And that's sort of a seasonal operation that could be done with a vendor. It could be done on a trial basis, and you'll see a picture of it in a minute. At Flat Top, you know, remembering there's a reservoir under here that contains millions of gallons of water, and Capital Region Water will be doing some renovations. If you go up there, you'll see the vents, and these are access places where they go in to maintain it. But maintaining that just as an open lawn area, and maybe having a simple sort of walking or jogging track around the edge of it, just so you could go in wet weather and jog around with some trail connections, but keeping that as just an open lawn area. Sometimes the Civil War Museum uses that as a reenactment place, but it might be a great place to throw a Frisbee around or throw a football around or fly a kite, just an informal flat area. It's really one of the only flat areas you have in the park. There's only about 18 inches of soil there, so we're limited in terms of what we can do. And Capital Region Water may be making some improvements to this facility in the next several years, so that you'll see the priorities. This is at the end of the priority list. The other thing that I mentioned earlier, if you remember, was maintenance, how we have to be careful about how we spend the city's maintenance money. And one of the things we're suggesting is to take about half of the 30 acres of lawn and turn that into a meadow. A tall grass meadow of grass that might be here, could have wildflowers in it. You'd have a border where if you had this trail going through, you might have a 5-foot trail and then maybe 3 feet mowed, and then you go up to a meadow. And the reason to do that is many reasons. One is you're not cutting the grass every 2 weeks. You might cut this meadow once a year. Number two, when you have taller grass like that, rainwater stays there longer and infiltrates into the soil, and it creates less runoff to other places. And there are some runoff problems below the park in some of the neighborhoods below the park, so we have to be conscious of that. And also it's a very different look. And these are on the hilly areas that aren't really usable anyway. So we're trying to suggest ways where we can create less maintenance for the city crews and also introduce a different look, a meadow with wildflowers that might flower different times of the year. So there's a lot of great potential with that. So again, that Gettysburg Cafe, it could be just something simple with some chairs and umbrellas, and even when, let's say, the food stand wasn't open, you know, it still could be a nice place to sit. And maybe this, you know, maybe the other option here is maybe this is serviced by a food truck, or a different food truck comes every night, that kind of thing, with an arrangement with the city. So I think just having a place where this could happen at the existing museum might be really, really nice and fun. The sledding hill I didn't mention, but that central area on the hillside, we want to keep that open where 23 is, because this is, we understand, a great place for sledding when we do get snow, if we ever get snow again. And then Flat Top, again, just keeping this as open play area. You know, kids could kick a soccer ball around or throw a football or whatever, and it's really well suited to that use. And then we get to the eastern part of the site, beyond Flat Top and the museum. The one thing we're suggesting here is a dog park. And a dog park basically is just a fenced area where people can bring their dogs, and you can let them off the leash when they're in the fenced area and they run around. And usually these areas are broken into two components, one for large dogs and one for small dogs. Sometimes municipalities have a non-fee user permit that you have to sign that you'll abide by the rules and pick up after your dog, and then you get a little electronic key or something to get in the gate. There's all different ways to do it, but the key is to give people a place to run their dogs. And the other thing this does, from all the studies we've read, is it helps socialize dogs. Today, because dogs are always on the leash sometimes, they don't get to play with other dogs, and they don't get into little, you know, tiffs and fights, and that's how they learn how to, their hierarchy, and they socialize themselves with dogs. Believe it or not, people do studies of this. But that supposedly helps your dog become a better dog. So the other thing we've seen in dog parks, if you own a dog, how many people own a dog? Okay, so you probably do things for your dog that you won't admit in public. Like, you know, some people send them Valentine's Day cards, or you buy them, you know, the really expensive food, or, you know, we all get a little nuts about our dogs. And what happens with dog parks is when you go to the park, with your dog. You're going to meet people you haven't met before. You're going to form new bonds. And we found that people who use dog parks become really strong stewards of the park, that they'll come to cleanup events, they will participate in community events for the park, and they get to know people. So it's an inexpensive improvement relatively, because you're just paying for some fencing, but it's a way to create a new user group coming to the park. So that's one of the reasons we recommended it. And then creating a little more parking off of this drive for that park. So those are the overall improvements. And again, if you've never been to a dog park, it's a pretty simple concept. Sometimes you use grass, sometimes you put some mulch down, and the main thing is, the main thing is it's a community-run facility that you're always, if you have a dog and you go there, you're responsible for being conscientious. And then I guess the last area is over at the greenhouse off of Taylor Boulevard. You saw the picture earlier. It's pretty destroyed right now, just beat up. And one of the thoughts is to do a facility near it called a pump track. And again, this is low in the priority, but this is a different type of bike facility where it looks a little bit like a construction site in some places, but kids can do this on BMX bikes, Scott has a bike program. He might want to use this, but it's a different type of challenge for kids, and they ride their bikes around and go up and down these elevations. And the other thought was also with the greenhouse building to maybe, if we could find an entrepreneur to do a bike repair shop there, that again could be a lease to a private sector business or a nonprofit to have a bike shop there so that kids could ride in the park and maybe even repair, have programs that kids learn how to repair bikes. These are a couple of shots of meadows, and so where we might let the grass grow taller, you'd actually come in with a different seed mix, and parts of those areas could look like this. So they have flowers different time of the year. And again, the benefit, the main one being less maintenance. You're not cutting this every 2 weeks. And then also, in some of the wooded areas, I mean, one of the great things we talked about was at the old school, and I'm drawing a blank on the name of the school, below the park? McDevitt School. There are chimney swifts that apparently go in and out of that chimney in the last 3 weeks of August or September. And that's like a weird phenomenon. And if you go there, you can watch the shifts, the chimney swifts go down the chimney en masse. And that just points up the opportunities to bring wildlife back to the park. And if you do things like bird boxes, bat boxes, bats are very important. They eat the insects, and they're important for the ecology of the area. And also pollinator boxes, wild bees, which are very important to the health of all the plants around, can come in and out of these boxes. So you can create these things. These could be Boy Scout projects, community projects, to encourage more wildlife coming in. I just saw a show the other night. The largest concentration of peregrine falcons in the world is in New York City because of all the skyscrapers. So that blew my mind when I heard it. You never think of that. So birds are really adaptable, and there are ways to get them to come back with both plants and little things like this. Almost at the end, part of the park goes through the greenway that runs through the park, and there's about 7.5 mile segment of greenway that is presently exists, and then 6.2 miles are off-road. And there is a section through the park that's on one of the park drives that's really shares the road with vehicles. So if we're able to take traffic off of that one section of road, we add a half a mile of off-road bike trail, meaning we don't have to compete as a cyclist with automobiles. And so that may be something to look at. And so this could be, if we do these circulation changes, this section of the greenway could be closed to automobile traffic, and it adds a place where you're not competing with automobiles, which brings us to the circulation plan. Circulation, we looked at a lot of options for this, and I'll tell you what we're suggesting, and then I'll go back and with a little more detail. We're suggesting to cut off this section of park drive from through traffic. And the reason we're doing that is we've heard a lot of reports of high speed through traffic there, and if we can eliminate that, we feel like we'll make the park safer. The other thing is we've got park drives existing that are paved that are, I don't know, 22 feet maybe, Christine, 20 feet, 18 feet in some places. And if we can make some of these drives one way, then we can have, let's say, an 8-foot lane or 9-foot lane for cars, or a 10-foot lane for cars, and then we can have 6 or 8 feet for pedestrians and bikes. And we can just stripe that with paint. And we don't have to add more pavement. Because if we keep all these drives two-way, then we have to keep the existing width, and then we have to add another 6 or 8 or 10 feet for pedestrians and bikes. And when we do that, we have to take care of that additional stormwater that it generates, and also it's very expensive. So one of the reasons we suggested some of these roads going to one way, we can keep the existing roadway, slow traffic down, and then also accommodate bikes and pedestrians on a separate sort of painted way. So as a pedestrian, you're not competing with cars. So let me just go through this. So from the Walnut Street entrance, we're suggesting, as it is now, to come up the road into that expanding parking area, and then you'd circulate back out like you can now. What we'd change is we'd cut off this connection from here to here. So you're not circulating through here on a vehicle. That could be open for park maintenance vehicles with a key. So that's one suggestion. In terms of the entrance off of State Street, you'd come in as you do now. You would circulate into the new parking lot, and you come back out this way. So this is a loop. Or you go through, once you go to this, go past this parking lot, this will be two-way. Then this becomes a one-way loop around up to Concert Drive and back down. So this becomes a one-way loop, and so we're cutting off this access, and we're cutting off this access, and I'll come back to this in a minute. And then to get to the museum at Taylor Drive is a traffic light, and so we're suggesting reopening that entrance one way from Taylor Drive up to the museum, back down, and back out National Civil War Museum Drive to Market Street. Also, to make this little section two-way to this new parking lot to the dog park. So what we're suggesting is a series of one-ways. Now, one of the things that might happen, or I should first say, one of the ways you can test this out is we can put in some simple metal gates that aren't that expensive, and you could test this for a 3-month period, let's say. And as I said, I'm sure there are going to be some people who are inconvenienced, but this is a low-cost way to test this circulation plan without incurring thousands and thousands of dollars of cost. And really, the long-term solution doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. The other thing that might happen, and again, this will be a little bit of a work in progress, is there may be reasons where people want to come in this way, circulate around, but then continue through here to the museum and then out. So you could easily open that gate and open that gate. This being one way, you couldn't go this way, but you just come through and go that way. And that still keeps, we're trying to really limit car traffic, but this was the main culprit in terms of speeding and cut-throughs. So that might happen where you come through that way too. So there are some options in here. Go ahead.
I want to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Okay, when you're coming off of that little triangle between Walnut and Whitehall Street going in the park.
Yeah.
So you said you're going to make that one way going up.
No, this would be two-way.
That's going to be two-way.
This would be two-way like it is now.
Up to the brownstone or all the way up?
Up to the brownstone, up to this point.
And when you go around the brownstone, that's when you make the circle to come back out?
Correct.
So that the road when you make that circle, the road that's going up
This one.
by the art
Yes.
shacks.
We're
what is
suggesting that
part
could be,
for?
we're suggesting it just be pedestrians or bikes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that would remain, but it would just be for pedestrians or bikes. Go ahead, Claude.
Okay.
Yeah. One of the things they've done in New York, with Central Park and they've done in Fairmount Park, is that during the week, they may let traffic in, but on the weekends, they block the traffic, again, on that back end. And that's something you can consider. That makes the park more accessible to families on the weekend, because that's when people are going to have the time to enjoy the amenities of the park.
And that could be a great way to try this. You could put the gates in, maybe during the week you leave it open, then you try it for a weekend. one of the great things that happened in Philly when the Pope came is they closed lots of roads. And regardless of if you went to see the Pope or not, one of the things that was most popular is when they closed those roads, people were riding bikes, they were playing Frisbee. So it's a thing that you can try and test, and you can try different combinations of this. Go ahead.
Have you considered doing like a safe circulation tour? Because if you're familiar with the park, you're sort of following this, but maybe schedule a couple of days where if you want to, you can sign up to actually walk or ride or the proposed route. Because it's conceptually, you can sort of look at it, but you can formulate a better opinion about it if you're actually seeing how it flows.
Sure. I mean, we've done that as a team, but you're saying for the community.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. Maybe Kevin's office and Jackie's office could set that up. Might be a Saturday where you could even walk it or bike it, or drive in a couple of vans. Yeah.
You guys could just create like a chalk path to follow.
That's a great idea, and that gets everybody who's interested out there at the same time talking about it. So, go ahead.
I'm really having an issue with shutting that part of the road down on the other side. I work at the museum on the weekends, and I deal with a lot of the visitors that come through. It's hard for them to find their way into the park, way out of the park. You know, to shut down that road, I mean, I have family that lives up north, and I live on the south side of Harrisburg. So if I leave the museum, I mean, I have to go the opposite direction in order to go north.
Right. Yeah, you know, as I said, this is a suggestion. Certainly, whatever happens here, there's someone who will be inconvenienced, and I think the beauty of it is it can be tested and see how it works. It's not, you know, by putting the gates in, you could even put temporary barricades for that matter, that you could test it, see how it works, see what the problems are, see what the kinks are, and try to work it out. I mean, the museum, again, as I mentioned, you know, having this section open so you could come from State and come through and get to the museum that way.
But you're bringing them in off of Market Street.
I'm sorry?
You're bringing them in off of Market Street into the museum.
Yeah, and whoops, and that's,
You understand what Market Street looks like, right?
yeah, and that's how Google sends people now.
Yeah,
to-
unfortunately, and
Yeah.
then when these people get to the museum, they're like, please don't send me down Market Street.
What's wrong with Market Street?
Well,
What sections of Market Street?
The visitors and separate.
And how soon would the traffic light be going there?
the traffic light exists there now.
That's the 20th Street, yeah, that's the 20th.
Okay.
That's there.
Okay.
That was still.
So again, this part of the plan is really a work in progress. I think, you know, the city would want to have a traffic engineer look at this too before they move forward with it. But again, it's something you could test. And by testing it, nothing's cast in stone and you can try it out. You have a question? Go ahead.
I do. I also have a problem with closing off the north side of the museum, the road there. I believe that it denies people the view of the north side of the museum to start with, unless you're on foot. And also, I do like driving through Reservoir Park to get to State Street from Market. It's a lot quicker and much more beautiful. That's the most beautiful LA in the city. Those trees on either side of the road as you drive through there, it's just beautiful and very calming and tranquil. And I think those of us who drive deserve that. And other than that, we would have to go to Pembroke, which is a gated community, as you know. And we'd have to go to 28th Street to go down to Canby to go to State. Or we'd have to go down to 20th Street on Market. And that's a pretty narrow street, goes up there. And I believe the young woman who complained about the traffic and the one-way, and then would have some additional complaints. It's just, I think it just is a very difficult situation, and I think that it just is, also because of the meadow, if you would not be able to see above the tall grass from the level of, you know, because it is a steep hill. I kind of just wonder, where's the Civil War Museum in this? And, you know, what are we doing to attract people to the Civil War Museum? And I'm concerned about the foxes and the deer. I'm concerned about that wildlife that exists in the park right now. And also, I just think that you could put in speed bumps. I know some people think they don't work, but if you put them close enough together, they do. And after a person goes through there too fast, a couple, maybe a month or two, and they have to replace their brake linings, they'll change their driving patterns. But I think that also you just have to consider that people who drive have a right to go through Reservoir Park.
And I think you need to mention, I've lived in that neighborhood for 55 years, and to my knowledge, not one person has ever been hit by a car on that road. And I wish I could say the same for State Street and Cameron Street.
I agree.
And I think, maybe, 20 gallons of some yellow paint, put a line there, because yes, the drivers are at fault because they do drive too fast. However, the pedestrians are also at fault because they think they have the left side of the road, the right side of the road, and the middle.
So delineate a bike path more clearly?
A bike/walk path, yes. Let's try that. I mean, let's not, just jump at making this one not accessible to the people who drive. And I know when I used to walk through the park, I felt more comfortable when a car went through the park occasionally. When Pembroke changed Hoffer Street to one way, I used to walk, through there in the evenings. I don't walk through there in the evenings now because there's not enough traffic to make me feel comfortable walking there in the evenings.
Yeah, I think these are all good comments, and again, the circulation plan doesn't make or break the renovation of the park. It's something to consider, something that you can try perhaps on a trial basis, different pieces of this. And again, the objective here is not to disenfranchise motorists. It's to enfranchise pedestrians and cyclists, because as opposed to when I'm a motorist, I'm protected in my 5,000-pound car. I'm a cyclist or a pedestrian, I have no protection. So that's the intent, and again, there's probably something in between here that will be a final solution. And again, what we're all striving for is safety. So.
Yeah, because I mean, look what we did up on Front Street, put that bike lane there. Nobody in their right mind's gonna ride a bike on Front Street.
Okay.
Very, not the population that they thought was gonna ride.
Well, let's keep going here. We've talked about the circulation. I think you've got an idea of what we're suggesting, and again, it'll be a work in progress with the city. In terms of phasing, go ahead, sir.
My question basically, I wanted to ask, is on the backside behind the museum, Parkway Boulevard that comes in, that now is part, that's when the Pembroke Harrisburg line is at.
Yeah.
Because that the whole area now that they stopped you from going across into Pembroke, was with cement barriers between Parkway Boulevard. What is that whole area back there being used? Because it's almost looks like a wasteland back there. Can that be accessible to get in and out?
Well, again, that's the
borough.
The borough has.
One side Harrisburg,
Yeah. Is that the borough or the township? The borough. The borough has taken that measure, and they've been involved in some of these meetings. And again, the city could work with them if the decision is to keep that road open, to try to reopen that.
Well, the reason why I asked that question is because there were so many things you were talking about as far as the parks and bike, like a motocross thing.
Yes, sir.
There's an apartment complex right there, tons of kids. If you put something like that available to kids that can come from there, that can come up through there, other kids, they can tell friends and they will gather, instead of it just seem like being a dead end back that way and nothing goes on behind the back part of the Civil War Museum. Like I said, that's a whole area that doesn't seem like it's involved because it's on the back side that nobody gets a chance to see.
It's one of the reasons we suggested the dog park over here was just because of that. It's not a well-used area. And if you own a dog, people tend to go, whether, you know, some people only go in the morning or at night if they have a full-time job, but other times people are there during the day. So we wanted to try to create more activity back there. But I think that's an issue for the city and the borough to work out. It's an important one. Go ahead.
It's also a very steep slope that goes down to a place where there's no traffic. So that would almost be the ideal place if you wanted to set up, you know, winter activities like tubing or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
Just two things. Well, ultimately, a lot of parts to this, obviously, but ultimately, I hope that there will be adequate signage in the park. And that a question, will anything be done to improve the lighting in the park? Because when it gets dark,
Yes.
it's a dark place.
We have, and when we get to the budget, you'll see we have provisions to replace all the lighting in the park. It's a major cost item, and we come in with LED fixtures, which are more cost efficient, energy efficient, and that's a major cost in the master plan. Both. The other thing I didn't mention, we have a provision in there for both lighting through the whole park and security cameras, both. Getting back to clean, green, and safe. So, yeah, very important piece. Go ahead, ma'am.
That was one of the questions I had about the dog park. You made a comment that it would be responsibility of the people who are using it to keep it clean and safe. Recognizing how some people can be responsible and others aren't. How would you be able to monitor, and you just spoke to the issue of having cameras back there. Since you have cameras at the traffic lights, would they work in the park similarly to how the lights on the cameras on the traffic lights work? So you'd be able to identify who's violating?
Yeah, I don't know if the main reason for the cameras is to police the dog park. Certainly there'd be cameras in that area. But again, the way dog parks typically work is it's peer pressure. You know, if you're a dog owner, you're responsible. You see somebody not cleaning up, you say, "Hey, sir, hey, ma'am, please pick up after your dog." And that's often how these dog parks work in all different situations. Certainly, you don't want to get into a confrontation over it. But the other thing I mentioned was there could be a non-fee user permit where a person signs up to use it. They sign a form saying they'll abide by the rules, and it might be a little, like, you know, electronic card key to get in or something. Obviously, you can jump the fence, but it's not as convenient if you have a big dog. So I didn't look. If I can just get to the cost, and we'll come back to this in the phasing, because I'm sure there are other questions. I just want to tell you about the phasing. So phase one is park security and lighting cameras are phase one, and that's a major cost estimate item. The dog park could be phase one. The chutes and ladders playground down here, the meadow plantings, and some of these circulation enhancements. In phase one, again, it's based on the money that the city is able to obtain from grants and other sources. It may not happen all at once. It could be, phase one could be 2 phases, but we've tried to break it down into reasonable pieces. Phase two includes the restroom at the west side, the trike skateboard area, and the tot lot at the west. That would be phase two. Phase three, we're suggesting the band shell seating, the food pull-off trucks, the spray play alley, which is here, and the expanded parking. Phase four would be renovations to the courts, including the handball and the pickleball and the basketball court renovations, and the expansion of the parking. Phase five would be the play area at the top of the hill, the tot lot, the additional pavilions, and an additional restroom up here, which is suggested. Phase six would be the circulation improvements that we talked about on Walnut Street and Circle. And then phase seven would be the work at Flat Top and the pump track and some of these additional trails. So when you look at the cost estimates, we've broken it down into phases. That top phase is about $2 million, and then you can see phase two totals. So the first phase is the largest phase that we're suggesting. You can see that lighting and security cameras is estimated at about $1.7 million. That's a lot of money. And again, that may have to be broken into pieces. And the total estimated cost is about 7.7 million. So you can see why this is going to take a number of years, not going to happen overnight. Now, part of getting grants is you have to be opportunistic. For example, we have the handball pavilion, etc. In there. It's a bunch of things, but you might be able to, the handball courts could be done as a separate item very early on. If the handball group could come up with those funds or help find those funds with the city, you can move any of these up further up based upon interest, based upon available funding. There may be a specific program that relates to one or more of these improvements. So we've tried to, when you look at the master plan report, you'll see that it's a very detailed cost estimate. It's not just basketball court, X number of dollars. It gets into cubic yards and square feet of this and drainage improvements. So it's very, very detailed so that when the city goes to do phase 3 in 5 or 6 years, they can see exactly where the numbers are coming from and the quantities. So it's very detailed. And then these are some of the places where the city can look for money. DCNR, DCD, Penvest, which looks at infrastructure. Jackie was involved in the program in Lebanon, where City of Lebanon got about $800,000 from Penvest to help with improvements to a band shell area. DEP and Redevelopment Assistance Capital Program. These are all possibilities. Obviously, the city has a long list of priorities of many things. Reservoir Park is one of those things. So every year, the city has to make decisions about what to fund or what to try to go after money for. So it'll be great if this was the only thing the city had to deal with. As you know, there are many other things. So we can go back to anything, and everything's on the table to talk about. Go ahead.
I noticed Walnut Street is on phase 5, so that's,
7.
Oh, was it 7? Okay, well, that's going to be a while. I pointed this out, but last meeting you didn't indicate which direction it was going down. So basically, the way the city is now arranged, the way to get to Walnut Street is they would have to enter up there, right around here, across the street, that little loopy thing.
Right.
Okay. And then the next street leading up to Walnut would be 19th Street, which is currently now the two-way street that should only be one way.
Yes.
And then Lynn Street, which is a tiny street. All of these streets along from 18th on up to right up here, there are no traffic lights. We have some serious issues up here that aren't dealt with, where people park right up against the corners.
At Walnut or at State?
At State.
Okay.
So people coming down, going out on State, we have more accidents here than most places. But the thing is, for people that are living up in the higher parts, they're all going to have to come up State Street and come up through that loop. And can the trash trucks fit up there, Mayor?
Again, we're not changing the cross-section of the street. We're not changing the width of the street.
No, I'm talking about people actually, how they have to get to Walnut with you making it one way. You're limiting their way into that particular street, and you're talking about more parking, but in the 18th, 19th, and that whole even side of the street, that is residential and business. So you're not going to really gain any parking there. And in the 19th and the 2000 block, one of the businesses take both sides of the street. So I don't think those businesses are going away, nor do I think the houses are going away. In addition to that, that's a very dangerous area now, because for some reason there are little to no sidewalks in most of those blocks. So people are walking in the streets as it is.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, ma'am.
I have a question. with the basketball courts renovations, are they just gonna renovate them? The reason, I wanna stand up for this. The reason I'm saying this, I've been living on Whitehall Street for 55 plus years. Until right now, as I'm talking to you, with some of the bad kids that grew up there, because kids come from all over, and there's a lot of good kids, but there are some really bad kids. I've experienced broken windows, which I had to replace. I've had to put locks on my front and back gate to keep them from sitting on my deck. They were throwing bombs the other week. I got hit. I have a car that I haven't had 6 months yet that got so many dents from rocks and stuff. When you call that 558 number, that's just like calling this table. And then they had the audacity to tell me one night to call the police station after 8 o'clock in the morning when they open. Mayor, I have called your office. I've talked to whomever answered the telephone. I've called the chief of police office and talked to whomever answered that telephone. I've called Channel 8 News. I've called Channel 27 News. I'm 76. I'm a prisoner in my own house. When the police don't come out on Whitehall Street, what we're doing is grand, and I'm glad they're putting security lights up there. And I hope around them tennis courts, we have the lights, because they don't mind giving you tickets on trash cleanup day. I've been there, like I said, 55 plus years. I've paid my tax, I'm a law-abiding citizen and everything, but I get no help. And when a police officer came there one day, I said, now when somebody get killed, that police officer came right out. Now I have security lights on the side and back of my house. I have an alarm system. I had a man come out to give me estimates to put cameras outside my house, and he had the audacity to say to me, well, you should put up a no trespassing sign on your fence. I said, what did you just say to me? I said, well, what are you, the city, doing? I'm doing everything to protect myself. When I get in a certain time, I don't come out. And you dare not say anything to those kids in the park. Because if they don't have a gun to shoot you, they're going to do something about your car or your house that night. And I'm so glad the mayor's here, because I've asked for help all over and I'm not getting anything. I have cried on that telephone to these people that called up. And this is beautiful, and I hope they have security. I said, what would be nice, I'm glad they're putting stuff up there, that little shack up there. I've been a park ranger before. When I retired from the government, I was a park ranger. I also worked for Parks and Rec. And I said, but I don't know what happened to the rangers now, but you see no protection, you don't see the police coming. And then when they ask me, do they have a gun, like I'm gonna go over there like I'm stupid and say, do you have a gun? You know, but I am so sick and tired of being sick and tired. But this is a beautiful place. And I hope with me being there for all these many years, and me being a senior citizen, that they think about me, because I've been living over there. Every time I come out of my house, I'm picking up trash. I pick up trash for about a block to throw it in the thing. I'm trying to help out and everything, but I'm not getting any help. And this is a beautiful plan, but I'm looking out for me, my old behind, on Whitehall Street. And I hope, like those kids coming down there, I hope they get security.
Let me address
I'm tired.
some of that, just in the sense that, first of all, I think everything that's being planned here will help the situation. And we do acknowledge that we do have a situation with pretty drastic misbehavior on those courts currently. Cameras will help, better lighting will help. The other thing that will really help is having more people in the park and utilizing the park on a regular basis. And I think that's part of the philosophy of the entire master plan here, is how can we attract more people to the park. Regarding the park rangers, that is a program that we've slowly brought back. In fact, we hired a park ranger. They had been decimated, had gone down to 0 when I took office. brought one park ranger back last year. We have a second park ranger that started this year, actually just started this week. And we're looking to increase the ranger program moving forward. So I would anticipate a strong ranger presence in the future. By the time the master plan was in effect, we understand that people have to feel safe in order for this to be successful. We're already implementing cameras and some other devices now as we speak as well to try and deal with these situations. So I would just say that we do very much care about you and your perspective, and the things that are being planned here are all designed to try and address safety first. Okay?
I've lived there for 55 years, 1 block from the park, and I am welcoming seeing the park come back to at least the level it was when I moved here.
I'm just curious, for those of you who live close to the park, what was the was the activity around the park during the symphony concert any different? Was it quieter? Was it, in terms of bad activity that night, or was there any noticeable change? I'm just curious if you saw any change.
You know what? I remember when they had something every week up in the band shell, because I used to work out of the mansion up here.
Yeah.
And we used to report down at the brownstone. And I remember when my kids were younger, how I would spread a blanket at the entrance of Walnut Street and sleep. I was here when they did the first renovation. You have trouble sometimes with the younger people coming out the park, but you also had trouble if they had a Bishop McDevitt football game or a Harrisburg High football game when the kids are going home.
Sure.
And like now, I think the biggest problem that I've experienced in the last maybe 3 years or 4 years is the one steps that's leading up in the park from Reservoir Street. To my understanding, a car went over that embankment during a snowstorm or something and cracked up all the steps and the railing and everything, and they never fixed it. So all those stones are there for these kids to get in devilment. So they throw stones at your windows. They throw them at cars going down the street. And it's something to do. The young men that are in the courts, they're busy playing the basketball. It's the little devils that are hanging around the courts that have nothing to do. And I've had a couple of neighbors that, hollered at them. In fact, I have a neighbor back here. She hollered at them one day. They said, "I'm not throwing them at you." The male lady that comes up there said she's almost got hit a couple times. They really don't care. They're not afraid of police or nothing.
Okay. Go ahead, ma'am, you had a comment?
I think that they ought to go back where it says it takes a village to raise a child, and the parents need to get with them kids. A lot of them parents are scared of the kids, They're trying to be their friend instead of being the parent. And my thing of the park, we all enjoyed the park back in the day, Everybody, went up in the park and they bought their grills up in the park and laid on the ground, had their music and everything, And that was the place to be, They had all kind of concerts and different stuff to do up in the park. And it just vanished, because people don't take pride in their stuff no more like they used to.
Yeah, well, hopefully as things start to change,
I hope so.
You can start to take it back from, and as the mayor mentioned, the dog park's a good example. If you had a bunch of dog owners there on a daily basis, those are another, so many more eyes on the park, that if something happens, it's another group of people to call the police if necessary, or just to have eyes, because sometimes just having more people discourages that activity if there are more people. So, yes, go ahead.
I think the water jets is a good idea to curb some of that nuisance from the kids, because they don't have too much to do up there. What about, I seen earlier there was a proposal for a pool that you were, it was the survey from the kids that you were giving the kids earlier.
Yeah, it was a spray pool. It was the same thing. It wasn't a swimming pool.
What about a swimming pool up in that area by numbers 18, 19?
No.
Yeah, you know, swimming pools are great, except they're really cash intensive in terms of not only building it, but then maintaining it and operating it, lifeguards, safety concerns. Many municipalities, if not most, are getting out of the pool business because they're just so expensive. And that's why these spray pools are more popular, because you don't need a lifeguard. There's no danger of somebody drowning. They're easy to operate. So it's very, very hard to pay for installation of and maintain a pool today. It's just a lot of municipalities. Lebanon's pool is, I guess, still going, Jackie?
Yes.
And that's, and they're struggling with
It's a
that.
money pit.
It's a money pit,
Very,
right?
very old business.
Yeah.
A new pool would cost more than the entire master plan. So you just have to weigh those two things together.
Yeah.
I'd like to see a
Yeah.
place for these motorbikes that are riding up in Reservoir Parks now, because they come up like cross 19th Street, cross State Street, it goes right up that hill.
Dirt boats.
Yeah. And I'm afraid those dirt bikes, if you put that thing that I saw that has the dirt and stuff, they may want to try to take over that.
So that's where we need a strong ranger presence, and I think we do that. I mean, if we're going to put the investment of millions of dollars into this park, we'll also put the investment in the personnel to make sure that the park is safer.
Because, when they had park rangers, when I was a park ranger, that's what we did.
Right.
Our whole shift. We'd go in and clock in over at the outlet, and we rode around to all the sites, go back over and start the same circle. And that's what we did our whole shift. And so you didn't see stuff that was going on. I used to suggest, I said, even with the brownstone, about making it a police hub. Brownstone is a very nice building, because if they had a police hub up there, like this shack, the only time the park rangers used that if something was going on in a bench.
Right.
Then I said they had the shack over here, where they really needed the shack over there on Walnut Street, because all the crowd is around the courts, the basketball courts. If those courts weren't there, if they were someplace, like I tell them, they need to, honest to God, when you get to the point where you can't even enjoy your porch, I said they need to put them out in the field somewhere, And I live right across the street, and I said, oh my God. I remember when they used to have tennis tournaments, it used to be very nice, and it all of a sudden it went to hell. With just like I said, all the kids aren't bad. It's just these little baddies.
Yeah. One of the reasons that we're suggesting the handball up in the left-hand corner, and also pickleball, is the handball group is very organized. And they would bring kids in on an organized basis and have games and tournaments. And again, it's another user group to try to make it not just basketball, but other sports. And the same thing with the pickleball, to try to get other groups using that area of the park, to try to discourage the kids who are causing trouble from being there. It may work, it may not, but at least it's a direction to do that. Other comments about anything? Go ahead.
The playground seems to be the most heavily, besides the basketball courts, the playground's very heavily used. I brought my 7-year-old granddaughter to the playground a couple of weeks ago, and it seemed like, it was cleaner than it used to be. The mulch was better, but while she was playing, I went around and picked up trash. It was trash. The garbage cans were full to the brim. It was pouring out of the garbage cans, so nobody had emptied those. I was trying to stuff more in there. And then as I picked up trash, I found a lot of broken glass in the mulch. There were children running barefoot, babies falling down. I mean, I didn't feel like it was a safe situation, so I hope when you do this that that'll be remedied, because my daughter-in-law doesn't even want me taking my granddaughter there, because she said homeless people like to sleep in those little castle things and pee in there. So, she's concerned that it's not a safe environment for the children to play.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge for any municipal maintenance department to keep up after, especially a busy weekend. And I know the city crews are out there, and they got some really dedicated people who do the maintenance for the parks. One of the things with the playground, the new playground would have safety surface poured in place. It's the rubberized surface, so that there's not mulch, and you're not cleaning it, and there's not glass in it. So those things can be somewhat rectified with new design. It's not a perfect solution, but I think you're, you know.
It's beautiful, but how do we get the people to take pride in it and take care of it?
Yeah, go ahead.
I noticed the absence of a skate park. Was there no plan to make a site or create a site for like a skate park, skateboard park?
You know, we discussed that. And that's, you know, that's this area. It's not really a skate park, but it's a place for that activity to happen. And it is, I wouldn't call it a skate park, it's a skate area. And I think we opted, and we discussed with the committee, to go with a less intensive use than a big concrete area that would be poured. There may be other, there may be other places. Did you have a skate park in other parks? I'm trying to remember. No. Yeah. So it's a smaller version.
One of the reasons I bring it up is because of all the skateboarding that's done on sidewalks and streets.
Right.
Which creates a danger for drivers as well as for pedestrians and the people that are riding skateboards.
I mean, some of that activity could happen in this new facility around the water tanks. And that's I forget the linear foot of that loop, but it's not small. It's pretty good size. Go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, so, you know, we're talking about bringing other organizations in to utilize the park. I would think something that's important, and I don't know if there's a summer youth program that happens in this park currently, but I would like to see a strong focus on activities for the local children in this neighborhood, because if we're talking about the baddies that come out at night and are being as elusive to the area, my hope is that if they're engaged and they come into the park for special programs, there would hopefully be some sort of a pride of ownership for their park to minimize some of that activity.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Scott at the back of the room, if you don't know Scott, he's the guy with the bike shirt on. He runs a program for young kids. Is it weekly, Scott, or twice a week or once a week?
A couple times a week.
A couple times a week, where he has about, I don't know, 50 bikes?
32.
32 bikes under the band shell.
Right.
And he takes kids out, and certainly more programs like that. I don't know, Kevin, are there specific programs now, camp programs at the park? Kevin Sanders?
There's a summer program in the park currently.
Okay, I didn't.
And I think just to piggyback on that, as far as like the different park improvements, as far as the different, upgrades and playground equipment and things of that nature, I think that's what's going to take kids from just standing around throwing rocks into actually participating in more activities. So just speaking of my time of being 28, 29 now, there hasn't been any upgrade in any type of equipment during that time period. So as people were commenting and saying, I have little siblings. I don't really take my siblings to those Reservoir Park because of the condition of the playground equipment. So there is a heavily need to make that upgrade. And once that upgrade happens, I think we'll start to see our kids divert to other activities inside the park and definitely have more usable space. So like for instance, I know there was, not to kind of bring that discussion back up, I know there was talk about, of the road closure and things of that nature. All of that becomes usable space for kids to do different activities, whether it's riding their bike free, I'm not saying, I know the park is for all ages, but when it comes time for summer times, when we talk about having different activities for our kids to do, this is the central location where these things can happen. So I think as far as like different things being presented, I think we'll kind of divert some of that behavior that we are seeing. I'm not saying it will divert all of it. I think, it goes back to park rangers, it goes back to our police responding. I think all these comments have been really great, and I think, you know, we are headed down the right direction as far as adding more activities within the park.
I just think we need to keep a focus on the actual true neighbors of the park, because that's really who's going to protect it and care for it.
Okay. Anybody? Go ahead.
The only thing I want to say is I want to thank you for a very, very good presentation and a good opportunity for us to let off our steam, and I really enjoyed it. And I think this is going to make a difference, and I am very glad I'm here today.
Yeah, well, please thank Lori and DCNR too. And
I thank you because it's very good.
And Jackie and Kevin and the mayor, because, you know, they brought us on, and we can only do what they let us do in terms of moving this forward and having a very open process. I think hopefully, even if you don't like some of the recommendations here, you know why we got to that point, and we tried to be very transparent how we get to things. But thank you for your comment, appreciate it. Anyone else? There are snacks. The city was nice enough to bring some snacks, so I want to mention that. Go ahead.
I'm listening to all these different ideas and recommendations. It's wonderful. But as a parent, we must realize that, one, it is a park. It is a kindergarten. It is a garden for children. And the activities must be focused around the kinders, the garden for children. And so while we're exploring and we're renovating and we're looking for income and all these other things, keep in mind it is not for puppies. Yes, we may allow them in our space, and they are a natural part of our habitat. However, it is a kindergarten, and it is a garden for children. Kinder being child.
Also adult.
Also adult. Yeah. There's no limit to how old a child is. A child is we may put limits to it, but you know, today there is no limits. We know that. We go out and play.
Especially
so adults having access. Some of them cannot walk up those steep hills to go to the breakfast place. And you know, so we need to consider that. I understand you want to shut off some areas, but you need to consider that some people that drives bad needs to take responsibility for that, because it is a park. We don't need to say that there's children here and to drive carefully. These are some of the you cannot take away logics by putting up signs. We need to feed into our community that this is a place for children of all ages, right? And it is not a speedway to drive through. So just logics and all, you can renovate, you can put up as much sign as you want, but if you have no logics behind it and no thinking behind it, it just becomes another space that you're going to have to renovate again. You know? So just keep the logics in here. We'll make it through.
Anyone else? You know, we're going to stick around for a while if you want to talk to us about specifics. Certainly, if you have comments, I think on the website, Jackie, are you listed or Kevin listed?
No, I think it's better.
Who is it?
Jackie's listed.
Oh, Jackie's listed, okay. So there's probably a couple weeks if you want to send in any comments, but you can look at the detailed plan, and we'll be finalizing this. And hopefully, in the spring, if all goes well, the city will be submitting some grant applications for something in the park. And so, you know, the reason we ask for your names and emails so we can keep in touch with everybody, the city can. So thank you all, you know, and continue to talk to the mayor and the staff about what's going forward, and hopefully good things will happen. So appreciate all your time and participation in the last several months. I hope to see you the next time.
Very nice.